There were 4 people working on my body for 41 minutes. I watched all 4 of them. Not from a dream, not from some haze of medication. I was gone. Clinically, medically, documentably gone. And I was standing above that corridor, watching 4 people try to bring back a body that I was no longer inside. I could see the younger one, brown jacket, dark hair. He hesitated at minute 32. He looked at the lead paramedic and I knew, the way you know when a man in your unit is about to break, that he was close to calling it. The lead shook his head, kept going. I watched that exchange. I watched it the way I have watched 1,000 moments in the field, detached, precise, every detail registering. None of them knew I was there. None of them knew that while they were doing all of that, I was somewhere else entirely. And what I was being shown somewhere else, that is the reason I am speaking now. My name is Marcus Calloway. I spent 14 years in the United States Marine Corps, 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq, reconnaissance and intelligence. My entire professional training was built around one skill: accurate observation under pressure. You see what is there. You report what you see. You do not editorialize. You do not embellish. You do not allow what you hope to be true to contaminate what is actually in front of you. That was not a talent I was born with. It was something the Corps drilled into me across 14 years and 3 combat deployments. I tell you that because I need you to understand what kind of man I was when this happened. I was not a man inclined toward spiritual claims. I was not a man who read prophecy or believed in visions. I was a man who had watched good people die in bad places and had concluded, as a matter of survival, that the most honest position available to him was that there was nothing waiting on the other side of this life. I had chosen that position deliberately. It was cleaner than the alternative. It was September 14th, 2022. I was working a private security contract at a warehouse facility outside Nashville. Ordinary Tuesday. I had run 6 miles that morning, which I do every morning regardless of weather or schedule. I had drunk 2 cups of black coffee. I had spoken briefly with my supervisor about coverage rotation for the afternoon shift. Nothing about that morning was unusual. Nothing about that morning looked like the last morning of the life I had been living. I was walking a back corridor at approximately 11:15 in the morning. And then I was on the concrete floor. No warning, no prodrome, no chest tightening, no shortness of breath, no lightheadedness. 1 second I was upright and operational. The next I was down. What happened inside my chest in that moment was the result of a condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a congenital thickening of the heart wall that had been present since birth and had gone completely undetected for 38 years. I had passed every military physical, every fitness test, every deployment screening. The thing that killed me had been with me the entire time. I was not found for approximately 9 minutes. A colleague, passing through on a different route, found me with no pulse. Emergency services arrived and began resuscitation. They worked for 41 minutes. 41 minutes of clinical death. The attending cardiologist at the hospital reviewed my case afterward and told me privately, not for the chart, privately, that the neurological outcome I had was not consistent with the duration of cardiac arrest and the delay before discovery. He said, and I am giving you his exact words, "I have no explanation for that." I have kept that sentence. I have written it in my journal, because for 2.5 years it was the only external confirmation I had that something that should not have been possible had in fact occurred. Now, I need to tell you what happened during those 41 minutes. Not what I felt as I was dying, though I will tell you that too. I need to tell you what I was shown, because what I was shown is the reason I finally broke 2.5 years of silence. And I need you to stay with me for all of it, because what is coming, what I was shown is coming, is already in motion. And some of you watching this already know that. You have felt it. You have been feeling it for longer than you want to admit. I left my body, and I understand that sentence sounds like the opening of something you have heard before, something soft and reassuring, the kind of near-death account that ends with white light and peace. But this was not that. What I experienced leaving my body was less like ascent and more like detachment. Operational detachment. As if I had been running a piece of equipment for 38 years and had just been separated from it without warning. The equipment was still running, or trying to run. The people in that corridor were working on it. And I was observing from outside, with complete clarity, with every perceptual faculty I had. I could see the ceiling stain at 11 o'clock. I could see the torn edge of a foil defibrillator packet on the floor near the younger paramedic's left boot. I could see the lead paramedic's jaw set when he made the call to continue at minute 32. That level of detail, that precise. I was not dreaming. I was not hallucinating. I was observing. And then I was no longer in that corridor. What I entered next, I have been trying to find accurate language for this for 3 years. I am a man who was trained to report precisely. I have sat with what happened for over 3 years, and I still do not have language adequate to the reality of it. But I will give you the closest I can get, because you deserve precision even when precision fails. The largest thing I had ever personally been inside was the Afghan highlands on a clear day. Standing in open terrain with no visible horizon, the mountains going in every direction, the sense of being a very small element inside something vast and indifferent and ancient. I have used that experience as my reference point for describing what I entered. And what I entered was larger than that highland landscape by a magnitude I cannot calculate. Not physically larger. Larger in a way that physical scale does not capture. The Afghan mountains were large the way a room is large. What I entered was large the way everything is large. And it knew I was there. That is the detail I cannot get past, even now. It knew I was there. Not passively, not the way a room contains you, the way a presence recognizes you. I have been in combat. I have had the experience of being in terrain that was watching me, where you know, by some mechanism that is not rational and is not wrong, that there are eyes on you and you cannot see them. What I entered had that quality, magnified past every scale I had available to compare it to. I was known, completely. The word is not seen, it is known. Every part of what I was, not just what I had done, but what I had thought, what I had chosen, what I had refused, what I had been afraid of, what I had pretended not to want, all of it was known. And what accompanied that knowing was not judgment. That is the thing I keep returning to, because my expectation, to the extent that a man who believed in nothing had an expectation about the afterlife, was that if there was something on the other side, it would look at a man like me and find the accounting wanting. That is not what happened. What accompanied that total knowledge of everything I was, the full and unsparing inventory, was something that I can only call acceptance. Not the earned kind, not the kind that follows effort or apology or amendment, the unconditional kind. The kind that does not require you to have been different than you were. That took me a long time to report honestly, because it is the piece that is hardest to defend against dismissal. Everything else I was shown, the maps, the sequence, the instruction, those feel, when I describe them, like something that came from outside. This piece felt like something I was always supposed to know and had been denied until that moment. But I need you to stay with me, because what came next is the reason I am here. I was shown a map. Not a map the way you think of a map, not colors and lines on a flat surface. A living map. A map that moved. A map that was more real than any geographic representation I had worked with in 14 years of military service, and I had worked with very good maps. This was terrain rendered at a scale and precision that I had no frame for. And I could see, with the clarity that characterized every element of this experience, the same clarity with which I had seen the torn foil packet and the paramedic's hesitation, I could see that something in the map was changing. Not quickly, not all at once. Changing the way a vine changes when it has been cut at the root. Alive for a time. Looking exactly as it looked before. And then, not. I want you to understand what I mean when I say I was shown nations that will not exist after 2026. I do not mean I was shown wars. I was not shown bombs or invasions or the kind of collapse that appears on the evening news as a dramatic event with a dateline. What I was shown was something quieter and more final than that. I was shown structures losing their ability to hold. Nations are structures. They are held together by a coherence, a shared story, a functioning government, an agreement between the people inside the borders and the power that maintains those borders. And what I was watching, from inside that living map, was that coherence failing in a sequence. Not randomly, in a sequence with a logic to it. The logic of a position that falls and makes the adjacent positions indefensible. I understood the logic because I had been trained to read it in terrain. I was being asked to read it at a scale I had never operated at before. And I could. The first nation I was shown was the first because it was the keystone. Remove a keystone and the arch does not fall immediately. That is the important thing to understand about what I was shown. The dissolution of the first nation was not the end. It was the mechanism that would make the others possible. Like a keystone, the pressure on the adjacent stones increases the moment it is removed. And those stones were not built to hold that pressure alone. I will not name the country. I have been asked to name it, and I will not. Not because I am afraid of what happens when I do, because I was instructed not to. On the other side of that experience, inside that briefing, and I use that word deliberately because that is exactly what it felt like, a classified operational briefing conducted by an authority I had never encountered and could not question. I was told what to share, and I was told what to withhold. The withholding is not evasion, it is compliance. What I was told to share was the pattern, not the names, the pattern, because the names will become self-evident to anyone watching the pattern. And the people who need to hear this will recognize the pattern without me handing them the answer. I have learned, in 14 years of military service and 3 years of carrying this, that there is a significant difference between being told the answer and being shown enough of the pattern that you arrive at the answer yourself. One of those produces understanding, the other produces dependence. I was told to produce understanding. What I can tell you about the sequence is this. The nations I was shown were not the ones most Americans would put on a list of vulnerable states. The nations that appear most precarious from the outside, the small ones, the poor ones, the ones already in visible crisis, were not the center of the sequence. The first nation I was shown was one that projects strength, one that from the outside looks like it is holding, one that the dissolution of would surprise most people who watch the news and believe what they are shown. That is the detail I keep returning to, because it contradicts every operational instinct I had going into that briefing. I expected weakness to be the first domino. What I was shown was that the structural hollow is more often inside what appears strongest. I want to stop here for a moment and ask you something, not rhetorically, genuinely. Have you been watching the news in the last 2 years and felt not alarmed? Not the acute alarm of a sudden event, but a slower, quieter thing, a feeling that something underneath the surface of the world was giving way. Have you looked at the arrangements of power you have always assumed were permanent and felt, without being able to put language to it, that the permanence was less certain than it had been? Have you told someone what you were sensing and been told that you were being dramatic, or catastrophizing, or consuming too much of the wrong kind of media? I am asking because that feeling, that specific, non-theatrical, below-the-surface feeling, was described to me on the other side. Not as anxiety, as accurate perception, as information that was reaching certain people through channels that cannot be explained by the information itself. I was told that the people most likely to hear what I was carrying were people who had already been receiving some version of the pattern. You were already watching. You were already reading the terrain. What I was given was not meant to introduce this to you from scratch. It was meant to confirm what you already could not shake. And then I was shown who was speaking to me. Or rather, I was shown in a way that I will not attempt to rationalize or defend or make palatable to any particular theology, a presence of such scale and such specific character that when I attempt to describe it, the only word that arrives every time for 3 years is the same word. And that word is Jesus. I do not say this as a religious convert delivering a testimony at a revival. I say it as a man who spent 20 years as a functional atheist, who had no prior investment in that word, who in fact had spent considerable energy avoiding that word because of everything it carried that I did not want to carry. But the word is the word, and I was trained to report what I saw, not what I wished I had seen. What was communicated to me, and communication is the wrong word because it implies language and sequence, and this was neither, was simultaneous. Everything I needed to understand was transferred in a moment that from the inside felt like no time at all. I was shown the map. I was shown the sequence. I was shown the logic of the sequence. And I was given an instruction. The instruction was specific. I am going to give it to you exactly as I have written it in my journal, because I wrote it down the day I was discharged from the hospital, before I told anyone what had happened, before I had processed any of it. Because a Marine writes down what was said in a briefing before the details start to blur. Wait. Watch for the first confirmation. When it arrives, speak. That was the instruction. 3 sentences. The clarity of it has not diminished in 3 years. And in early 2025, watching coverage of a geographic development I will not specify beyond saying it was visible in international news, I opened my journal to a page I had written in October 2022, and I read a description that matched what I was seeing on the screen. Not approximately, not in spirit, detail for detail. The match was exact. I want you to understand what that moment was like. I had been carrying this for 2.5 years. I had told my cardiologist. I had told one former unit member who had his own experiences he did not speak about. I had told no one else. Not my daughter. Not my therapist who was helping me with the re-entry into civilian life, and who would have found a clinical framework for it that I did not want to hand it to. I had been waiting, following the instruction, and in early 2025 I sat in my truck in a parking lot in Knoxville, watching footage on my phone, and I understood that the waiting was finished. The confirmation had arrived. The first piece was visible, and the instruction had a second clause. When it arrives, speak. I am speaking. I want to stop here for a moment. I need you to actually hear what I am about to say, and I need you to sit with it before you do anything else. What I carried back from 41 minutes of clinical death, what I was given in that briefing conducted in a place that I can only describe as more real than this one, was not given to me to keep. It was given to me to set down in a specific place, at a specific time, in front of specific people. I do not know your name. I do not know where you are watching this from or what your week has looked like or what you were doing when you found this video. But I know, with the same certainty with which I know everything from that experience, and that certainty has not eroded in 3 years, that this was not meant to reach everyone. It was meant to reach some people specifically. People who had been watching something move beneath the surface of the world and had found no language for it, and no one willing to confirm it, and had begun to wonder if the watching itself was a sign of some failure in them. That feeling is not a failure. That feeling is information. I know what it costs to carry accurate perception in a world that is not yet ready to confirm it. I carried it for 2.5 years. I know what it is to run 6 miles every morning as a practice and not thinking about the thing you are not yet permitted to say. I know what it is to call your daughter every day and love her fully, and know that what is coming will require her to be strong in ways you cannot fully prepare her for. I know what it is to sit with a therapist and work carefully around the edge of the central thing, because the central thing is not hers to receive yet. I know what the weight of correct and unconfirmable knowledge feels like when it is distributed across every morning of your life for 2.5 years. That weight has a name. The name is mission. What I was sent back with is not a burden that diminishes me. It is a commission that requires me. There is a significant difference, and what I am doing now, speaking in compliance with the instruction I was given, is the lightest I have been in 3 years. Because the weight of the thing you were told to carry is nothing compared to the weight of carrying it past the point where you were told to set it down. The nations I was shown will not surprise you when they become what they become. That is the thing I need you to hold. When the pattern becomes visible to everyone, and it will become visible, because what I was shown was not conditional, it was not a warning that depended on action taken to prevent it, it was an account of what was already in motion. You will not be surprised. Some of you will remember this. Some of you will remember sitting wherever you are right now, hearing a man who died for 41 minutes tell you that the map is changing. And you will know, when you remember it, that you were told in time, that the confirmation arrived before the event, that the blessing of knowing early, which is sometimes also the burden of knowing early, was given to you because you were someone capable of receiving it and doing something with it. What I am about to say now I was told to say directly. This is not my language. This is what was given to me to carry back and set down in front of whoever would hear it. You are not wrong about what you have been sensing. The structures you have felt shifting are shifting. The permanence you have doubted is not permanent. What is coming is not random, and it is not the end of everything. It is the end of specific things. And the people who are awake for it, who have been watching the pattern, who have been developing their capacity to read what is actually happening rather than what they are being shown, those people will not be caught unaware. They will be, as I was in that corridor watching 4 people work on my body, present, clear, and operational. Standing outside the machine, seeing exactly what is happening, and knowing what to do next. That is the blessing I was sent back carrying. I am setting it down here. This is what I want you to do before this week is out. Not a long list. One thing. I want you to find the place in your life where you have been waiting for permission. Waiting for someone to confirm what you already know. Waiting for the pattern to be obvious enough that saying it out loud stops feeling like a risk. I want you to understand, from the account of a man who spent 41 minutes clinically dead and came back carrying a classified briefing from the other side of this life, that the permission you have been waiting for is here. You are not wrong. You are not dramatic. You are not consuming too much of the wrong kind of media. You are reading the terrain correctly, and the terrain is changing. If you have someone in your life who has been saying what you have been sensing, someone you have been dismissing or quietly avoiding because confirming what they are saying felt like too much to carry, I want you to call them this week, not with an agenda, just to say, I heard something today and I think you should hear it too. That is all. Pass it forward. That is the action I was sent back to request. If what I shared today reached you, if any part of it landed in a place you had already prepared without knowing why, I would ask you to subscribe to this channel. Not as a transaction, because there are more accounts like mine. More people who came back from the edge carrying something specific, and this channel exists to give those accounts the weight they are owed. The weight of precision, the weight of honesty. If you believe that weight matters, that the specific testimony of specific people who saw something deserves more than dismissal, then stay. Be part of the record. In the comments, I want to ask you one thing. Not what you think about what I shared. What you already knew before you heard it. Write it. One sentence. What you have been sensing about the state of the world that you have not been able to say out loud in ordinary conversation. Write it here, in this space, where it belongs to a record and not just to the silence inside your own head. Sometimes the first step to carrying something correctly is saying it out loud. This is the place to say it. I came back for my daughter. I came back because I was told there was something that required me to still be here. I spent 14 years as a Marine believing that the most honest position available to a man was that nothing waited on the other side of this life. I spent 41 minutes on the other side of this life. And now I believe the most honest position available to me is the one that reports what I actually saw. What I saw was a living map of a world in transition. What I was shown was a sequence. What I was given was an instruction. And what I am leaving you with, what I was sent back carrying and am now setting down here, in front of whoever was meant to find it, is this. You were already watching. What you needed was confirmation. This is the confirmation. Whatever is coming, and something is coming, and some of you have known that for longer than you have admitted, I hope this reaches you in time.